Blodeuwedd, Rhan, Noswaith, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Welcome back. Section 3 of our MKAL for 2022. I'm so happy to see you again and hope that you are still on board after our section 2, which has taken you to this point where you have this pattern, which we have named feathered, to complement with our story associated with the owl. So we've moved from the knight to the owl, and for this section we are moving on to the garden. So we know that our character is associated with all these things, and we really want to represent them as we move on with our shawl. So I hope that you are remembering a few tips and tricks. Some of them will be applicable to this section and others will not. So I have removed all of my markers, my stitch markers. And the reason for that is because for this section, I think you will get into the repetitive pattern of knitting the section, just like you did for this early section. It seemed a little bit awkward at the beginning, maybe, where you were just getting to know the stitches. But once you get to know the sequence of stitches and the pattern repeat, then it's actually quite easy to get along with this next section. So the feathered was a bit tricky, yes, probably the trickiest section of the shawl, but if you're through it, you are on your way towards the end and past halfway, so well done. So the section that we're working on is called the flower garden, and we are working using a pattern associated with the secret garden, is what the original pattern is called, and this is it in a flat square. You can see it. Now I just want to remind you, like I did on my last video with pop-ups, that sometimes the straight stitch squares, they don't look the same as our pattern as it appears on the triangular shawl, and also they are often modified slightly, so just keep that in mind. But this is a nice Shetland weight, and this is the original pattern from the Stittionary called Secret Garden, and you can see it sort of has this circular appeal to it in the middle, and then it has these little stalks and yarn overs. You know all the stitches for this pattern already. For this section we are doing the yarn over, the knit 3 together and the knit 2 together on occasion, alongside your purl stitches on the row back. So like section 2, you are doing all your yarn overs and your decreases on the same row, and then you are purling back, so a little reprieve in that wrong side row. Okay, so that's the pattern as it looks from the Stittionary and also in flat. But then as you get to our pattern, this is what it starts to look like on the triangular shawl. You can see it starts to move on an angle rather than the upright. And this is knit in a hand spun, a little bit chunkier than fingering weight, maybe a DK, I would say, hand spun. So the pattern is a little bit less visible in that one. And then this is a Shetland yarn, a Jameson's yarn, where it comes, the yarn overs come up really nicely. But sometimes in that Shetland, depending on how they're pressed, the circle doesn't come up really nice, which is this section here, the sort of bud. In the lace weight, which is what I'm working on, it comes up, I think, really lovely. So where some of the patterns look maybe a little bit nicer in the Shetland, others look a little bit nicer in the lace. Together, I think they all look good in both, to be honest, but they're just different, yes? And I think some of them maybe show off different characteristics a little bit more depending on the yarn. So in the lace weight, you can see I'm through a little bit of it as normal, and you can see that the circular bud-like pattern is starting to appear there in the pattern. So it's coming down here, circles around, and then going back there. And that's because the way that the pattern is written is it shifts. So we knit along a series of rows where the pattern is in that direction, and then we are shifting the pattern over to create this swirl and directionality as we go. So to start with this section of the pattern, if we just get knitting, yes, this shouldn't be too difficult for you because, as I said, you've got all the vocabulary already to get going with this. But we've cut the neutral variegated yarn and we've started with the third color, which in our case is this pink. It's called Geum from Woolly Tangle. And again, a lovely lace weight that I'm working in. And started on the first row. We are a few rows up. So we started on row 103 for this section, and I am at row 117 at the moment. So I'm through the first shift and I'm about to make the second time the pattern shifts. And I wanted to take you through this section because it does have the stitches, but then also it has the area that the knit 2 appears a couple rows up. So here we go, let's knit. So as you start, you are knitting your border to start with, knit 2, then you are yarn over and into your pattern. If you're reading on the text or the chart, it applies. I'm using my chart and I'm still, if I just show you briefly, I'm using my chart and I'm still using my tape just to keep me on track. But as I said, I've ditched my stitch markers because I think the flow of the pattern gets going. So knit 2 at the beginning, yarn over, and then I'm going to knit 3 to start the section. Row 117. Then I'm going to do my yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2. And based on the row that I'm on, I'm going to knit 3 together. So I pick up all 3 of those stitches, knit them all together, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, we're back in the repeat now, yarn over, knit 2, knit 3 together. So the sequence of stitches is fairly short in the repeat, and you should be able to keep track of it, but use your stitch markers if it helps you. Okay, so there we go, I've got it there. So there's the knit 3 together, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, knit 3 together, and back 2. So now I'm going to a knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, and then knit 3 together. Pick up those 3. It always helps when you have sharp needles. Sometimes you've got to stretch your knitting to remind you. But just take your time, pick them up, make sure you're not taking anything extra. Okay, so that's the sequence. You knit that sequence and that repeat stitch section until you get to the middle, which is all the way over here on mine now. Here's my little stitch markers, they're still there. Then you yarn over, knit 1, yarn over to start again and do the same again all the way to the end. So I'm going to leave you at this moment. Maybe I'll just show you one more time actually, and then I'll come back to you when I'm at the end of the row just to remind you at the very end. So just to remind myself that I've picked up 3 there. So I'm going to knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, and then I'm back to the knit 3 together. Okay, so I will see you in a second and I'll be at the end of the row. Okay, I'm here at the end of that row, row 117 we are on, and I have a few stitches left to go here. So there is my knit 3 together, knit 2. So I'm on a yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, knit 3 together. is the last one on this row. This is where the pattern differs sometimes. Sometimes you are doing a knit 3 together at the end, and sometimes you are doing a knit 2 together. And this happens when you do the shift often between the two patterns. So that is a knit 3 together, and then I have 4 stitches remaining until I have my 2 border stitches. This also is another important feature. The number of stitches that you have left often will tell you whether your pattern is on track or not. If you get to this point and your pattern says that you've got 4 stitches and you've only got 2, or you've got 1, then likelihood is there is an error in your pattern further along somewhere and you need to check back. Either that or you're not quite on the row you think you're on. So make sure that as you get to the end of this side, or as you get to the middle section here, before you go across your stitch markers for the middle, make sure your stitches are matching to the pattern, so that if you need to make a correction, you're going back to make the correction before you carry on. It's just a good cross check. The other way that you can do it is to count your stitches as you go back on your purl rows. But if you are doing that, you might then have to take out double. So check if I've got 4 stitches on my pattern at the end after the knit 3 together, which is right for this row, then I'm going to do that. I'm right, my pattern is on track, and I don't always get it right. Sometimes I've got to go back too. It's not the case, you know, it's just worth checking. Somebody might have distracted me. Then the yarn over before you knit the 2 for the border. And that is the end of your row. When you then turn in this section, remember you are purling back most of these stitches. But I'm going to remind you to remember your border stitches are knit. So you knit the first 2 and you will knit the last 2. But in between there's no yarn over and you purl back. So this is the row that's okay to be distracted on. Yes, if somebody decides they want to have a quick chat with you about something, or they got to check in with you, ask them to wait until you're on the wrong side, because it'll be much easier. When you're on the right side, it needs a little bit of concentration sometimes just to stay on pattern and to keep track of things. Hopefully you are finding some time to do this. I'm going to knit to the end of this purl row and come back to you at the beginning of row 119, just so I can show you the differences with the shift and where the knit 2 together might appear. See you in a minute. Okay, we're at the beginning of row 119, and this is where the shift happens. So we are knitting 2 to start with. Yarn over, and we're going to knit 2 but only yarn over 1. So knit 2, yarn over, and then we are going to knit 2 and a knit 3 together. So because the pattern has stepped over, we are 1 yarn over down at the moment. But we are going to compensate for that, not here at the beginning, but at the end of the section. So at the end of the triangular section, I've got 3 stitches remaining on row 119, and that is where you're going to knit 2 together, knit 1, then do your yarn over. So when we didn't compensate for the 1 yarn over versus the knit 3 together at the beginning of this section row, we're compensating for it at the end by only having a knit 2 together rather than a knit 3 together. So just watch your pattern and it should hopefully tell you this information. So that's a knit 2 together, knit 1, yarn over to complete that first triangular section before you then slip your marker, knit 1, slip your marker, yarn over, and you are into the next half. Okay, you are there. You've got all the information that you need. The stitch vocabulary is well developed. I wish you the best for this section, and I will see you for section 4. You are on the home straight. Stick with us and you'll be finishing off in no time, and you're going to have a beautiful shawl to complete the MKAL at the end of the month. Best wishes and noswaith or good night to you all, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. See you next time. Ta-da!